Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zekthar,
And I'm Yuxin.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We have seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month, we'll be discussing the stalwart first founding of the Imperial Fist.
That's right, Sektar, and this week we'll be talking about the Imperial Fists themselves, their origins, ways of battle, and some of their more notable feats. But before we get started, shouldn't we ask the fine listeners to subscribe and whatnot?
No,
Why not?
We haven't mentioned anything as to why they should do so. Sure, we're going to talk about 40k and all the lore that inspires, but they don't know what we're going to say. I might as well say halfway through the video that Dawn was a ginger fairy and sprinkled his knowledge across the Milky Way system like a cookie tree.
Please don't say that!
Well, of course not. I would never say that.
Rogel Dawn is an upstanding gentleman of truth of the Imperium. He is the most noble of...
Sektar,
Yes?
we covered Dorn last week.
Yes, well, still, my concept remains.
Well, if we aren't going to ask for subscriptions, what are we doing next?
Well, let's start with their origins before Dorn, shall we? Now, the first battalions of the 7th Legion were raised from across Terra at the end of the Unification Wars. While many other legions drew their recruits from particular ethnic or national sources, the flesh of the 7th Legion came from the people of Terra as a whole. Even in domains where other legions had rights of tithe, the 7th Legion took some of the youths as initiates. Often these would be those who exhibited the greater capacity for endurance, both in mind and body. Many of a taciturn nature, slow to talk but quick to act. Why so many of such a wide pool of recruits should be similar is unclear. Certainly the process used to activate the 7th Legion's gene seed seemed to have inflicted intense pain. And so perhaps it was a purposeful selection of stock suited to surviving the augmentation process. It is also possible that a pattern of recruitment once formed perpetrated until it was tradition. Now, no matter the reason, the grim nature of those recruited into the 7th Legion was well suited to their use. In war, the 7th Legion was concerned with conquest. While all of the Emperor's forces fought and died to expand the Imperium, many saw only part of the greater vision. Defeat the enemy, tear down their strongholds, break their beliefs, and still you would have a land that could turn against the Imperium in the future, or provide other enemies with a weakness to strike at. Victory was not enough. To conquer, one had not only to defeat one's enemies, but to hold the fruits of that victory. This philosophy underpinned every action of the 7th Legion. In attack, they would pay any price in their own blood to secure victory. And once they had victory, they would begin to consolidate what they had taken. This pattern can be seen time and again in the later conquests of ancient Terra. It was the 7th Legion which broke the cities of the Crystal Sea, and then raised the fortress of the 5th Circle from their ruins. In the ice-wrapped pinnacles of Himalaya, also known as the Himalayan Mountains, they lost 3 battalions to secure the defeat of the witchery of the Wind-Color clans. But the first Imperial Bastion began to rise against the cold sky within solar days of that victory. Across Terra, the fruits of their fortress craft gazed down on those who dwelt in the land around, a constant sign that the strength which had conquered them remained, rooted in the earth. In the first solar decade of their existence, the Imperial Fists raised 600 citadels upon the lands of the conquered. It is said that the dead of the Legion lie still in the foundations of each, their skulls and blood mingled with the stone and mortar of their walls. With these bastions pinning the conquered lands to the Imperium, order would spread amongst the people of these new domains. The old ways would change, fall, or be replaced by the new. And if they did not, then the looming fortress would answer the question of what the response to rebellion would be. The 7th Legion were more than builders and castellans. At their root, they were the most direct expression of the Emperor's design for uniting humanity, for they were crusaders. Fortresses solidified conquest, and the 7th Legion sought conquest with a focused hunger. While fortresses and ordered domains sprang up in their wake, the 7th Legion would never linger, but were always moving on, invading non-compliant domains and pushing the frontier even as they reinforced what they had just taken. Massed shock assaults using the full array of weaponry within the Legion, typified the 7th Legion's approach to war. Multiple battalions often took to the field en masse, breaking enemies with a hammer blow force. On the plains of Kennesaw, the 5th Battalion of the 7th Legion broke the lines of the Tyrant Sea with an arrowhead of 50 war machines. It is said that the dust cloud thrown up in their wake blotted out the sun. In the tunnels of Galabaz, they cracked the crust above the buried city and dropped into the exposed tunnels beneath while the explosions were still echoing across the mountains. But always, in the wake of the destruction they wrought, they replaced what they had broken with something stronger. It was from these early conquests that the 7th Legion acquired its name. While many looked on the lands taken by the 7th Legion, they said as if it was the hand of the Emperor had descended and gripped it with an unbreakable fist. The description of the service done by the 7th Legion must have pleased the Emperor, for he personally decreed that they would be known from then on as the Imperial Fists, and bestowed on them the right to bear the laurels of victory as part of their heraldry. Dutiful and taciturn as ever, it is said that the renamed Imperial Fist accepted their honors in humble silence. Kind of a perfect company for Rogel Dorn, huh, brother?
Their tactics seem to more resemble the Black Templars' tactics at this point in time.
What do you mean?
Blunt trauma.
Okay. Well, you do realize the Black Templars came from the Imperial Fists.
Yeah, I know, but at the same time, so did the Crimson Fists and the...
Right. So they all kind of have a very...
established the same sort of methodology.
Okay, so how do the Crimson Fists go about crusading or conquering?
It depends on the situation.
I'm pretty sure that they're pretty similar. Most Space Marines, anyways, that come from the Imperial Fists kind of have a very... I mean, it makes sense. They come from the same group. That they would have kind of a very similar tactic or strategy of how they do things. Now, mind you, anyways, they're going to deviate slightly anyways from what they do because that's one of the reasons why they broke off. But the Imperial Fists, anyways, this is kind of their bread and butter. It always has been. Conquest, building fortresses. We've joked about it so often anyways. The building of fortresses. Because it's what they do. They like to build walls. Walls, Yuxin. It's all about walls.
Which the Black Templar don't do.
So you could say, anyways, I guess the big difference between them and the Black Templar at this point is the Black Templar forgot about the whole building walls part.
They're basically
smashing through.
Yeah. They're on a never-ending crusade, so they're just like, yeah, well, it's ours now. Well, their crusade basically is taking back what was taken over originally.
Yeah. Yes and no. They do occasionally, anyways, try to expand out, but yeah, I see your point. It's just,
yeah,
they might actually, maybe, and I know a lot about a few characters of the Black Templars, and I understand their concept of constant crusading, but as far as I know, they're not really known for being like builders, right, of fortresses or fortifications.
No, in fact, basically when they conquer a place, they just go, okay, now that you're part of our area, we'll tithe from you and then just move on. So congrats! You're now part of the Imperium. We are taking some of your people, and then we are leaving.
So then they're very definitely not like the Imperial Fists of old then. Because the concept was, as well, yes, they would conquer and you do conquest and crusade. They would always, anyways, build up fortifications behind them. In fact, the Black Templar could probably take a good note on that because, quite frankly, if you build fortresses behind you, you can kind of keep the land that you've already taken. As opposed to one of the problems probably with the Black Templars is that they pave through anyways, and then in a few hundred years you end up with rebellions and all sorts of different things. Because they haven't really
part of their thought process is that somebody will come behind them and do that. Maybe that's part of their thought process.
Maybe, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the Black Templars, but I mean, don't get me wrong, they back some really cool characters, but yeah, I mean, if I had to march somebody into war, I'd probably take the Imperial Fists over the Black Templar. That's just me, though. But what do you have on the agenda for us today?
Now, a couple months ago, when we discussed how to storm a city with the Iron Warriors, you took a historical battle from Terran 42 as an example, yes?
Well, yes, I did. I used the fall of Constantinople, where the Ottoman Empire led by Mehmed the Conqueror took the city of Constantinople, defended by Constantine the 11th.
Quite right, brother. This time I figured I'd do the same thing, yet use a siege where the defenders were triumphant, known in Terran 42 as the Battle of Vienna.
Why
Now,
does that ring a
historically,
bell?
huh?
That sounds vaguely familiar. Sorry. Go ahead.
Now, historically, the Battle of Vienna took place at Kahlenberg Mountain near Vienna on the 12th of September, 1683, after the city had been besieged by the Ottoman Empire for 2 months. The battle was fought by the Holy Roman Empire led by the Habsburg monarchy and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, both under the command of King John III Sobieski, against the Ottomans, who were led by Grand Vizier Mirzafonin Kara Mustafa Pasha and their vassal and tributary states. Interestingly enough, this battle marked the first time the Commonwealth and the Holy Roman Empire had cooperated militarily against the Ottomans. The defeat is often seen as the turning point for Ottoman expansion into Europe, after which they would gain no further ground. But you guys really don't care about that. So, let's set the scene. The time is M31 during the Great Scouring. The place Mordian in the Imperium Nihilis part of the Obscura Segmentum. Proteraba has decided on his way back to the Eye of Terror to task his first commander, Kitamor Forex, known as the Breaker. The task of pillaging Mordian for its massive wealth of steel and war engines, but mainly for the massive slave population they can garner. Rogel Dorn, fresh from his defeat at the Iron Cage, has learned through various reports of Forks's plan, and with the agreement of his brothers Rabute Gilliman and Lehman Russ, decides that Mordian is far too important to lose to the Iron Warriors. Unfortunately, Rogel Dorn finds himself in a very similar predicament as the Siege of Terra.
Why?
Well, as opposed to his brothers, he is by far the closest to Mordian, and it will be a matter of time before Rabute can show up.
Oh, so he has to buy time, yet again, for the leader of the Smurfs to show up?
Precisely. Also, while it seems of little note at this moment, but will be important later on, a chapter of the Dark Angels known as the Raven Wing has asked to take up arms with Rabute Gilliman, even though they find it distasteful, because they will have to fight beside the wolves.
Quick question. Why are they joining?
Well, Bartholomew Griffenclaw, leader of the Raven Wing, has given a vow to the governor of Mordian to come to his aid due to the steel of Mordian being vital to the construction of his war bikes.
I see.
Anyways, Dorn rushed to Mordian and began to quickly set up the defenses of the capital hive city of Vienna, now known as Dorn's Refuge. Now, as you know, Zekthar, there are 5 key ingredients to holding off a siege.
Right! What were they again?
Number 1, supplies. A siege lasts only as long as people have food to eat, water to drink, and ammo to defend the stronghold. If any of these 3 things expires, the siege is doomed. This was not a problem for Vienna, much to the relief of Rogel Dorn. Number 2, the walls. If the walls, which normally there are multiples, are not up to the task of a siege, the ground is not worth holding. This, unfortunately, Vienna was lacking. So Dorn set to the task, ordering the completion of better walls. Thick slabs of ceramite pocketed with air and then stone.
Yeah. You understand how that works? Have you seen the inner workings of tank armor at this point?
No.
It's actually fairly interesting. So they've got like a solid, like really thick steel plate, and then they actually have like a pocket of air, and then they have another thick steel plate, and then they have normally some sort of like sand or dirt or something like that, and then another thick steel plate. And the concept behind it is that when something hits that first steel and it penetrates, instead of just building the thing anyways with really thick steel, the air pocket actually slows the bullet down. So it actually stops it when it hits that second plate of steel. That's what he's doing with these walls.
As everybody knows. Okay.
No, should.
Okay. Thick slabs of ceramite pocketed with air and then stone would do the trick. Also, as a side note, Dorn commanded the Mordians to demolish many of the houses around the city walls and clear the debris, leaving an empty plain that would expose the Iron Warriors to defensive fire if they tried to rush into the city. Which leads us to number 3, the defenses and guards themselves. Now, Dorn has brought with him the remaining 8,700 Imperial Fists from the Iron Cage, combined with the 15,000 Mordian troops from the planet, and some 500,000 volunteers, aka someone who could take orders and pull a trigger. Defenses-wise, he has brought 370 Medusa artillery guns that he has mounted along the newly constructed towers that are every 30 yards around the city, on the outer and inner walls. Which leads us to number 4. Have a backup plan.
Huh?
Well, as you know, brother, during the siege of Terra, there were many walls, and when one fell, the defenders moved back to the next one. If you're going to survive a siege, you need more than one wall, or at least a stronghold that will hold. Fallback points are essential in a siege, and those that defend a place must know how to withdraw to the next place to defend. Yet again, things are against Dorn because Vienna only has one Great Wall, so a second wall 100 yards in from the Great Wall is quickly constructed. They're not as well made, but Dorn has a plan for that.
He does he?
Indeed, it's his sons. As you mentioned last week, brother, the Imperial Fists are well versed in urban fighting. Half of his forces will retreat to the second wall, while the other half will carry on harrying attacks against the usurpers.
That doesn't sound like a lasting strategy.
It isn't, and it's not supposed to.
Really?
Yes, because that leads us to our last item, reinforcements.
Oh, okay. Now I get it.
Really? Do you, Zekthar? Do you?
I believe I do. He only has to last as long as it takes Gilliman and the relief forces to show up, right?
Indeed. Now that you understand Dorn's tactics, let me tell you what happened. Phalanx and the Iron Warriors under his command laid siege to Vienna on 7.15.475.m31. On the same day, Phalanx sent the traditional demand that the city surrender to the Iron Warriors. He was surprised to have a response from Mughal Dorn, who refused to capitulate. Hearing that the defender of Terra was set against him, Phalanx immediately started the siege operation on 7.17.475.m31. Preparing for a long siege, Phalanx ordered his forces to dig long lines of trenches directly towards the city to help protect them from the defenders as they advanced. Now, the Breaker was prepared for a siege and brought 130 Predators and 19 Rapier armored carriers, compared to the defenders' 370 Medusas. Mining tunnels were dug under the city walls, which would then be filled with sufficient quantities of explosives to demolish the walls. According to scribe Andrew Wheatcroft, the outer palisade was around 150 years old and mostly rotted.
Thank goodness Dorn fortified it then.
Indeed.
That would have been terrible. They would just chug through with their predators, and that would have been the end of the story.
They wouldn't even need to do that. They just have to punch it. I mean, it's raw wood.
Good point. Yeah, it's these are Space Marines we're talking about. Anyway, sorry. Carry on, sir.
This action alone garnered the defenders an additional 3 weeks to the time it would take to get past the walls. This, combined with the delay in advancing their army after declaring war, gave enough time for Rabute to show up on 9.475.m31. Now, some historians have speculated that Kitamor Phalanx wanted to take the city intact with its riches and declined an all-out attack, not wishing to initiate the plundering that would accompany an assault. If it were so, it was a grievous fault. Yet, that doesn't mean the siege was easy on the defenders. Far from it. The Iron Warriors cut virtually all means of food supply into Vienna. Fatigue became so common that Rogel Dorn ordered any soldier found asleep on watch to be shot. Increasingly desperate, the forces holding Vienna were on the verge of defeat when, in late 8.475.m31, Imperial forces under Rabute Gilman made planfall 3 miles northwest of Vienna. On 9.6.475.m31, the Space Wolves under Lehman Rest crossed the Danube River 19 miles northwest of Vienna at Tulln to unite with the aforementioned Raven Wing, led by Bartholomew Griffinclaw, much to the chagrin of Griffinclaw. During early 9.475.m31, approximately 5,000 experienced Iron Warriors sappers had repeatedly demolished large portions of the walls between the Berg Bastion, the Lobel Bastion, and the Berg Ravelin, creating gaps of about 12 yards in width. In response to this, Dorns and Astartes began digging their own tunnels to intercept the placing of large amounts of explosives in the caverns. The Iron Warriors finally managed to occupy the Berg Ravelin and the low wall nearby on 9.8.475.m31. Anticipating a breach in the city walls, the remaining Astartes and defenders prepared to fight in the inner city, behind the second wall. In an effort to stop the siege, the relief army of Imperial forces would rush to prepare a response, despite the multi-chapter composition of the army and the short space of only 6 days. An effective leadership structure was established, centered around Lehman Russ and Bartholomew's Raven Wing.
Wait a minute. I do know this story.
Yes. Well, anyway.
And the winter souls arrive!
Rush!
Sorry.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. And it's an awesome song by Sabaton.
It's one of my favorites.
And
Dang the copyrights. If only we could actually play that during this whole thing. But sorry.
Anyways, the Great Covenant began their assault on the Iron Warriors. The combined besieging forces, led by Phalanx, were less united and facing problems with motivation and loyalty, and struggled to prepare for the expected relief army attack. Phalanx had entrusted defense of the rear to Sultan Vol Braun and his cavalry force. There is doubt as to how much Braun's troops participated in the final battle before Vienna. Braun despised Phalanx and refused to attack the relief forces as it crossed the Danube on pontoon bridges, and also refused to attack them as they emerged from the Vienna woods. The chaos cultists of Wallachia and Moldavia would also prove unreliable. The unified loyalist troops signaled their arrival on the Kahlenberg above Vienna with flares. The forces in the city of Vienna responded by sending Seneschal Efried, one of Dorn's noble stonemen, on a successful spy mission to penetrate the Iron Warriors' forces and notify the relief troops of when the joint attack was to be made. The battle started before all units were fully deployed at 0400 on 9.12.475.m31. The Iron Warriors' army attacked, seeking to interfere with the deployment of Gilliman's coalition troops. The Ultramarines would be the first to counterattack. Marius Gage moved forward with his Ultramarines on the left, while Rabute and the other Ultramarine forces in the center, and after heavy fighting and multiple Iron Warrior counterattacks, took several key positions in particular the fortified villages of Nussdorf and Heiligenstadt. By midday, the Ultramarines had inflicted significant damage on the Iron Warriors' forces and would come close to a breakthrough. At the same time, the Raven Guard,
Whoa. Hey, hang on, wait a minute. When did the Raven Guard get here?
well, they secretly supported the coalition.
Okay. So they were
trying to sabotage the Iron Warriors' siege.
Well, hang on, half a second. You could have at least told us that they were here. You didn't need to be sneaky for them. Did you perhaps
Moving on. By
they were there?
bridge over the Danube, Brigitena Island, where the Wallachians had been stationed in order to cover the left flank of the Iron Warriors. Forks launched counterattacks with most of his forces, but held back some of the elite Terminators and chosen units for a simultaneous assault on the city. Forks had planned, but ultimately failed to capture Vienna prior to the arrival of Gilliman's forces. The sappers had prepared a large, final detonation under the Lobo Bastion to breach the walls. In total, 10 mines were set to explode, but they were located by the defenders and disarmed. In the early afternoon, a large engagement started on the other side of the battlefield as Lehman Russ advanced on the Iron Warriors' right flank. Despite the arrival of the relief army, several Iron Warrior forces persisted in their attempt to breach the city's defenses, allowing the Wolves to advance on the field. By 1600, the Wolves had captured the village of Gerstoff, which would serve as a base for Bartholomew's charge. The Chaos Army was in a desperate position between Lehman Russ's and Rabute Gilman's forces. Marius Gage and Lehman Russ both decided independently to press the offensive and decisively defeat Forks's forces.
That's a shocker. Lehman Russ deciding to just randomly attack all on his own? Yeah, that doesn't sound at all like the wolf.
Meanwhile, at 1530, Gilliman's forces resumed the offensive on the left front. At first, they encountered fierce resistance and were unable to make progress. However, by 1700, they had begun to advance and taken the villages of Unterdobling and Oberdobling. Rabute's forces were now closing in on the central chaos position, and as they made preparations for the final push, Bartholomew's Raven Wing took action.
And the winged hussars arrived!
Yes.
Coming down the mountainside!
Hush, you grot!
Sorry, but don't you ever call me a grot again.
Fair enough. Anyways, it is recorded that the Raven Wing slowly emerged from a nearby forest to the cheers of onlooking infantry, which had been anticipating their arrival. Ironically, Sektar, it is the only recorded time that the Wolves of Fenris howled in glee for the Dark Angels. At 1600, a detachment of 120 Raven Wing engaged in a probing charge, successfully proving the Iron Warriors' vulnerability to attack but taking many casualties. During this action, they would begin the approach to Turkenschanz, which was now threatened by 3 separate forces. At this point, Kidamore decided to leave this position and retreat to his headquarters in the main camp further south. However, by then, many of his soldiers were already leaving the battlefield. The relief army was now ready for a final push. At around 1800, the Wolf Lord ordered Bartholomew to let loose the dogs of war.
He really didn't go for that, did he? Let
Nope.
loose the dogs of war.
But he did know the time was right to unleash his warriors.
Okay, hang on a second. I could totally see Lehman Russ saying that to a Dark Angel.
Let loose the dogs of war. And he's like,
just seeing the Dark Angel roll his eyes and just be like, damn wolves. Sorry. Go ahead.
With all 3,000 bikers, they charged down the hills. The largest battle charge in Ravenwing history. Bartholomew led the charge on his rare and elusive jet bike called Corvex, at the head of 3,000 Ravenwing guiding 15,000 Thunderwolf cavalry.
And the winged hussars arrived.
Havarl Redblade, who participated on the wolf side, wore a sprig of burnt straw in his helmet to signify his burning hatred for the Iron Warriors. The charge quickly broke the battle lines of the Iron Warriors, who were already exhausted and demoralized, and would begin to retreat from the battlefield. The cavalry headed directly towards the camps and Forx's headquarters, while Dorn took his remaining Astartes and sallied forth out of Vienna to join in the assault. In the end, the Iron Warriors were slain in a terrible rout, and only Forx and his small contingent survived. After he regrouped with Perturabo in the Eye of Terror, he found his lord much displeased with his defeat, yet took leniency on Forx.
Really? Hey, that doesn't sound like Perturabo.
Well, leniency means he didn't spend the next 100 years killing him. Instead, he spent the next 3 weeks having the skin peeled from Forx's body to remind him of his failures.
Ugh.
For the Imperials, they showered Dorn with praise, which Rabute Gilman recorded and sent into the Eye of Terror, hoping Perturabo would see and know pain. Quite the story, eh, Zektar?
Indeed. Well said, sir. Now, if you want to know what actually happened, it is actually called the Battle of Vienna. It's actually
called the Siege and the Battle of Vienna.
Right. It's kind of a two-parter, and very much anyways, like you said. Yes, no, there is no Raven Wings. There are the Winged Hussars, though. And yes, the song from Sabaton is awesome. But getting back to the concept, anyways, of what you were saying with siege warfare, I think, quite frankly, the thing that everybody really forgets is the aspect that you're really just temporarily stopping somebody. Most of the time, anyways, if a siege can continue on, eventually the people that are besieging, the people who are besieged will just lose, right?
Yeah, it depends on the circumstances. If, for example, the force that was going to attack was rushing as fast as they could to catch up, then they could end up on the losing side because they wouldn't necessarily have brought the supplies or had the supply chain set up
right
fast enough, and then they would it'd be a waiting game who runs out first.
Right.
Judging by the fact that the besieged place would probably have more supplies and resources, they would probably win out.
Right. And don't get me wrong, there are times anyways where it did take place where, like, for instance, the army would show up, they didn't have the, supply chain you were talking about. The people behind the walls kind of realized this, and they're like, you know what? If we immediately come out and we punch them, we hit them hard enough, they won't have enough troops to actually besiege our city. Yeah. So sometimes that whole concept of sallying forth and going out behind the walls, that did happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, when it says that it pretty much that those that are besieged will always lose unless they get reinforcements, it requires at least the siegers to have a substantially larger force than those that they're fighting against. And they also, like you said, anyways, have to have the supply chain to feed all those people. And then it is very much a waiting game. It is kind of, okay, will they run out of food first, or will reinforcements arrive first? And if reinforcements arrive first, then if you're in that city, you're really hoping that they win.
Yeah.
But real quick before we move on, what you got any other concepts or thought processes when it comes to defending a siege against a siege? Sorry.
Okay, so we didn't tell you about much, but defending a wall is a concept that we obviously overlooked in this case.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we briefly talked about it, but not a whole lot. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
In a lot of cases, you want to have the most protection near weak points.
Right.
Which is why you'd want it specifically, like, for example, over a door.
Gates, yeah.
Yeah, gates. And then also you want to have some way to rebuild where holes will be created also.
Now, one thing that that we've kind of overlooked, and whenever we talk about sieges, especially in 40K, which always
The
is kind of,
massive amount of 2 times.
well, I mean,
Well, three.
these couple
Don't
times, and
forget
then we
the
also
series
talked about like
here.
the Siege of Terra, and we've talked about other sieges before. But the one thing that I always been kind of puzzled about, especially in 40K, is that they have the ability of aircraft, correct?
Right?
So I guess my conundrum is like, why don't they just fly over the walls and drop
Well,
troops in?
because in a lot of cases they have things like tarantula turrets, which are
Right.
basically automated rocket launchers.
Or flat guns. Yeah. Oh no, I understand that concept, but I mean, if you can take those out and then move over the walls, that way you don't. I mean, the whole concept is you want to get past the walls, right?
Right?
The easiest way to do that would just simply be to fly over them.
Right.
So, and it's not just this siege, anyways, that we're talking about, but I'm also thinking, like for instance, the Siege of Terra, or the Magellan campaign, or all these different sieges, and it just seems like they just sit out there with their artillery and try to blast away at the walls. It's like, why don't you instead, anyways, try to take out their anti-artillery? You bomb everything that's behind the walls, so you can get past their anti-air stuff, and then you just fly over. To me, that would make more sense. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, you'd have to have the air superiority.
Right. It does seem like in Warhammer 40K that the humans don't really use a whole lot of aircraft. Not to the extent as, like, for instance, the Eldar or even the Tau. But to me, anyways, yeah, they've got. I mean, don't get me wrong, they got great spaceships, but the whole actual like in flying, like through the atmosphere. I mean, I know that they have like quite a bit of fighters and stuff, but it just doesn't seem like they use them all that much.
Yeah.
Which I've always wondered why.
Because that's the job of the branch that we don't talk about.
Oh, the Navy. Anyways, just some food for thought. Thank you, anyways, for that story, the Battle of Vienna.
Yeah.
The notable campaign that I wished to talk about was actually the 2 Wars of Uranius.
Why does that name ring a bell?
I don't know. Maybe you can figure it out before I'm done with my chronicling.
You do know. Fine. Keep your secrets. I'll figure it out on my own.
Yes. But anyways, now, Uranius Prime was first settled over 15,000 Terran years ago, during the Age of Technology, as a mining and manufacturing colony. It became the capital of a small stellar empire known as the Uranius Continuity. The worlds of the Uranius Continuity were a series of planets close to the Sol system in the Segmentum Solar, which had maintained commercial and communication links to one another even during the vast warp storms of the Age of Strife, due to the existence of a series of ancient warp gates of unknown origins. Ruled by a caste of techno-nobility from the world of Uranius Prime at the heart of the network of warp gates, the Uranius Continuity was a kingdom of iron and hungering industry. Now, contact with the Imperium and this pocket of humanity occurred by accident. A lost squadron of warships returning from the Gehennial prosecution of the Great Crusade in the late 30th millennium was forced from the warp into one of the continuity's peripheral systems. Before they could jump back into the warp, the squadron was surrounded, boarded, and overwhelmed by cybernetically grafted warriors. The cries of the squadron's astropaths echoed through the immaterium, and far away the Imperium heard and turned its gaze upon the worlds of Uranius. An envoy fleet was sent and allowed to return bearing the continuity's answer to the Emperor's demand of fealty. The techno-nobility flatly refused to bow to the Emperor, but instead invited him to join their empire as a tributary.
I bet that went over swimmingly.
Yep. It went over as well as you think. Although I would actually kind of find it funny if this happened with a republic or an imperium larger than the Imperium of Man. I wonder how well that would have gone. Did you imagine that, Yuxin? This group comes back, they're just like, no, we're not going to. You can join us, though. And then the Emperor, obviously doing the Emperor thing, is like, well, no, we'll go conquer them. And then he shows up, and it's like 10 times the size of the Empire of Man. What do you think the Emperor would have done? Do you think he honestly would have looked at that and gone, oh, I have made a mistake?
But you see, here's what the difference is. The Emperor has plot armor.
He's a MacGuffin.
Yeah, he's a
to the
MacGuffin.
highest extent.
That's why sometimes he's just barely above Primarchs. Other times he can conquer a world by himself.
I understand that.
Crush stars with his hands.
You're missing my point. How great that would have been, anyways. That it just turns out to be like this giant empire, and he's just kind of like, oh no. You know, I agree with you though. That, well, first off, that would never happen because it's the Emperor. But secondly, anyways, it's just, it would be interesting if they ever do run into like a republic or an imperium that is about the same size, especially now in the 41st millennium. It's about the same size or even a little bit larger, that has a drastically different concept of how to run a human empire and how that would even work. I mean, what do you think? I think it wouldn't work now, especially because of the what am I thinking of? The pasta shoot. No,
the church.
Yeah. The
ecclesiarchy.
Ecclesiarchy. Thank you. Jeez. I don't know why I was brain farting there. But yeah, the ecclesiarchy, they would just be like, heretics! And then, you know, there would be no time for negotiation or anything, which would probably suck it up. What do you think?
I think it would be interesting. That's for sure.
Now, anyways, getting back to what we were talking about. For the Empire's response, it was a no shocker. The Imperium set about sending a fleet to conquer the techno-nobility, and thus turned to the Imperial Fist Space Marine Legion. It fell to Hashin Yonad, commander of the 39th chapter of Inuit, to prosecute the war. A superlative warrior, Yonad was reckoned by many to be one of the Imperium's greatest strategists. Called upon many times as a fleet commander and siege master, he planned meticulously and executed his plans with brutal swiftness.
Isn't he also the person who was put in charge of the Retribution fleet?
The Retribution fleet.
And
why is that not ringing a bell?
The fleet that was sent to take care of Horus.
The fleet that was sent to take care of Horus.
Yes.
You're talking about before the drop site massacre?
And I think it was, maybe. It
might be. I don't remember, actually. It's been a while since I've looked
he was one of the stone men, though. I do know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was. The stone men, if I recall right, there was, 5 of them?
Yeah.
It was Alexis Pollux, Sigismund, Yonad, Afreed, and then who was the 5th guy? Now, you mind looking that up while I continue on with our story?
Yeah.
Okay. Marshaling his fleet at Talon, thousands of warships carrying over 20,000 Imperial Fists.
Dang.
Alongside millions of troops of the Imperial Army and the Mechanicum, launched their assault upon the unsuspecting worlds of the Uranius. Within 2 solar months, the continuity was reduced to a single core world of Uranius Prime. Their empire cut from around them. The techno-nobility in their iron towers looked to the night sky and saw the darkness stolen by the light of the Imperial fleet. They surrendered then, and the sun rose the next day on the seat of yet another stellar empire brought to Imperial compliance. But even as the Imperium moved in to claim their prize, the worlds of the Uranius continuity were beset by an unknown menace. A few accounts speak of a darkness deeper than the void, a living lightning and flame-wreathed chrome. 6 systems burned, their stars igniting to terrible life before crumbling into cold embers. Commander Yonad made the terrible decision to defend only some of the worlds, otherwise they would lose all. As the unknown enemy appeared in the system after system, they met the Imperial Fist. As more of the enemy came, the Imperial Fist detonated warheads they had attached to each warp gate. Without their gates, the unknown enemy simply vanished. Their advance had been halted on Uranius Prime when its gate exploded.
Well, first of all, he was one of the stone men.
We knew that already. But did you find out was it the guy you were thinking of?
Yes, he was.
So he's the guy that never made it to the drop site massacre. He's the one that got stuck in the warp, if I recall right.
Well, the fleet was horrifically damaged, and he unfortunately did not survive.
But that is the Imperial fleet that was supposed to make it to
The Isvan system.
The Isvan system, and it never made it there.
No. And Alexis Phalanx, another one of the stone men, was actually basically his protege.
Okay. Oh,
and
interesting.
So, taking charge of it. So the 5 members, though, of these stone men is Sigismund, Efreid, Alexis Phalanx, Tyr, and Yanad.
Oh, Tyr. That's the guy that, or Tyr. That's the guy that I don't know anything about. But anyways.
Well, he died due to
I don't know anything about him. He died. I'm pretty sure they're all dead at this point, by the way, Yuxin.
He got bashed in by Forgebreaker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, now that you say that, I remember that. He tried to take
hammer given to Perturabo by Ferris Manus.
Yeah, if I recall right, he tried to take on Perturabo alone, and Purdy pretty much picked him up and smashed him into the ground and then thumped him with the hammer. Anyways.
Well, not by himself, but there really wasn't many of them left. But getting back to what you're talking about, who are these strange enemies of man?
I actually really delved into this, and all I can tell you is that they were some sort of strange Xenos race, yet who or what they were, I can't really say. I do have a couple of guesses, though.
Really?
Yes, but do you by any chance have one?
Well, let's see. They simply vanish when a warp gate's destroyed. Generally would mean it'd be something from the warp.
Part of me, yeah. Quite frankly, I think you're tracking the same way I was. I was thinking maybe like demons. Because remember, anyways, during this is during the Great Crusade of the 30th millennium. Demons weren't people didn't know about demons. So a lot of times when they did happen to show up in the Materium, they were just thought of this as this strange Xenos race. Very much like what the Tau think anyways, a lot of times now. If you recall right when I talked about Farsight, and the first time he comes in contact with demons, he thinks of them as this strange Xenos race. So I'm kind of on the same track with you. The only other thing I could think of anyways is it's that first off, these warp gates aren't really warp gates. They're, I can't remember what they call them, but they're the gates anyways that the Necrons use.
Okay.
And that way anyways, when they blew them up, all the, because Necrons are really, it's just, they're metal robots, right? And then when you separate...
No, we proved otherwise, remember?
I'm talking about the massive armies of them anyways. Yes, it's the souls of the Necrontyr in robotic form. But if you blow up these they're not really warp gates. It's a different type of gate, and for the life of me, I can't remember what they call it. But if you eliminate that, then
I want to say Nexus, but that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, but if you eliminate that, then maybe they just transferred back to the temples and the pyramid things anyways that they fly in. So when they disappeared, it was more along the lines that they just kind of all crumpled into nothingness. That's the only other thing I could really think of. Or it could be just some other strange Xenos race that has never shown up again for the next 10,000 years. There have been stranger things. But
well, we know it isn't the Pancake Bears.
Yes, we do know that it's not the Pancake Bears. But regardless of who these aliens were, all but one of the star systems of the Uranius continuity died. And at the cost of thousands of Imperial Fists and billions of human lives, Uranius Prime survived, but barely. See, this is the other reason why I was also thinking that it might be the Necrons, is because they have some weapons that specifically known to eliminate stars.
Okay.
So that was another thing anyways that kind of made me think of it. But then again, if I recall right anyways, the Necrons didn't really start really waking up until the 41st millennium, right? Like Trazine is awake by this point, but Very few have awoken by this point.
You've mentioned that basically they've been nuking these warp gates, which I assume aren't all in space.
I don't know. I thought they were all in space, but I could be wrong.
The effect of setting off multiple nukes to destroy a warp gate could also have a very negative impact on whatever's nearby.
Well, yeah, but no. I mean, one of the things though that I mentioned before, anyways, is that when they came out of these gates, they actually started destroying the stars in the uranius area. These aliens were actually destroying the stars. So, like I said, that's the other reason why I thought Necrons. But I mean, like I said, I could very well be wrong. It was just the kind of a thought.
Or they found some Dark Age technology.
Yeah, that could be. It could be humans. Yes.
The Blind Emperor had a thing that had a weapon that could do that. Actually,
right. Well, okay. So actually, no, look at this. Yeah, you might be right. Anyways, that some of these things, anyways, were actually on the planets too, because the death of the warp gate and the cluster of Xenos craft, which had penetrated the Imperial Fist lines, had changed the shape of the planet.
yeah.
Its surface had been ravaged by unnatural fire. Its world city cracked and rendered to dust and ash, from which the shattered roots of its great towers rose like broken teeth.
Oh, I figured it out. What this planet is called now.
I don't know. Keep it to yourself. I'm almost there. Looking upon the charred remains taken from the pyre, the Imperium gave the world of Uranius Prime a new name, one that echoes with a world brought to the threshold of death, but one that still lived. Necromunda, they called it.
I knew it. So, this I'm assuming took place before Rogel Dorn saved Necromunda from an orc invasion.
Kind of.
Huh?
Well, according to records, what you say transpired. Yet, according to another point of view,
Whose?
some of those historians that lived in Necromunda at the time.
Oh.
It was not orcs, but rather a brief defiance of the former Necromunda's human colony against the coming of the Imperium that unleashed a war that made ash waste from where hive cities rise. Okay, so real quick before you tell us of your final story, what do you think of this one?
I think, well, like I said, I think that more than likely it's some sort of chaos entity. That's what the Xenos race was.
Yeah, I'm
or something that thrives inside of the warp.
Like I said, the only other thing I could think of is maybe the Necrons. Just on the way that they kind of attacked, and like I said, the cold chrome, kind of thing, kind of reminds me of like metallic robots. Gives me kind of that thought, but yeah, like you said, anyways, if it's coming from the warp, it's more likely demons than anything else.
Or something that thrives in the warp. Because there are a couple of types of species that do that.
Oh, really? Like
yeah.
Xenos? Like what?
Can't remember what they're called right off the bat. There's the ones that are like enslavers, I think is what they're called, or something like that.
Oh, yeah. The ones that came about, if it were called right anyways, at the end of the war in heaven, right?
Yeah. And then I think there's other races that also thrive in the warp.
They look like giant bugs, and they kind of eat anything that's in the materium that's warp based. So psychers, that's dinner. That's kind of the concept that they have.
Take over people. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, anyways, I agree with you. I think it's probably something from the warp. It was just the more that I thought about it, and the more that I kind of looked at how it was more of like how it was actually being attacked. These places were attacked, the more I thought Necrons. But if they really were warp gates, then yeah, it's got to be anyways probably demons and warp entities. But the fact that that's how Necromunda started, anyways, I find kind of interesting. And the Imperial Fists are actually part of their whole. They're still there, as far as I know, anyways. They have like a bastion there.
Obviously, don't care about the constant gang fights and.
Well, we talked about this last week, anyways. They're not there to rule. They are there, anyways, to just make sure that everybody doesn't die. But yeah, I just found it kind of interesting. Well, I think we got time for one more story about the Imperial Fists. Do you have one that has to do well? And most of these ones that we've talked about, anyways. Well, one of them we kind of made up. Most of the stuff, anyways, is taking place in like the 30th to 32nd millennium. Do you have anything that is like more closer to home, like 41st or 42nd millennium?
Well, prior to the appearance of the Phalanx at Cadia, during the fall of Cadia.
Yeah, we actually briefly talked about that in our video, Cadia Stands, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It had actually been prior to that in heavy conflict. This conflict was known as the Battle for the Phalanx. Now in 999.m41, Warsmith Shantu, having survived a recent encounter with the Imperial Fists.
Excuse me, have a second. You remember Shantu? I talked about him when we talked about the Iron Warriors. He's the guy that seems to escape quite often. They have tried killing him, if I recall right, a number of times. I want to say 6 times. And once he actually faked his own death.
Well, until literally carved on the body was Shantu lives.
Right. Until he made his comeback. And if I recall right, this is his comeback, right?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, tell us what Shantu's up to this time.
Well, he returned to exact vengeance, looking to upstage Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. Shantu allied with Demon Bellicor and planned to launch an attack on Holy Terra itself by hijacking the Phalanx's enormous firepower to unleash a bombardment on the Imperial Palace. Shantu and Bellicor's forces succeeded in boarding the Phalanx in a surprise assault. Now, under most circumstances, this wouldn't be such a large issue.
Wait, what? Really? I mean, okay, to me, I would think anyways being boarded by demons and Chaos Space Marines would be a big deal, but why not? Why isn't this a big deal?
Well, normally there'd be plenty of Space Marines to take care of the problem. Remember, it's no moon, but it's the size of one.
Good point.
Unfortunately, at this particular time, there is only one company occupying the Phalanx when this attack occurred. This company was the newly formed Third, led by Captain Tor Garridon.
Another quick question. Where did the rest of them go?
Well, what happening was, while the third company was being rebuilt, Darnath, Lysander, and Vornhagen took 5 companies of the chapter to worlds near the Eye of Terra in a crusade against chaos.
Well, okay, so that kind of makes sense, though, if you stop and think about it. I mean, this was taking place during the 13th Black Crusade, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what it is, they were out helping anyways. All those
they were on the crusade to go against a crusade.
Right. They were trying to help against the chaos incursion around Cadia. Okay, that makes sense. But real quick, actually, before you keep going, anyways, you mind going into a little bit of detail on who Bellicor is? He's kind of interesting, actually.
Okay, so Bellicor is known as the first Prince of Chaos, and also the one who heralds the conquerors. He is Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided. He is beholden to all of the Chaos Gods equally and is kind of like a petulant firstborn son. And being jealous of anyone
He's not a fan of Abaddon.
Favor.
That way. Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
And so just like any other person that's constantly jealous and doesn't like things like that, tries to undermine them.
Right.
So at this point, he's kind of sort of wormed his way into Abaddon's council by now.
Oh, really? Okay, so he's working with Abaddon. Interesting.
Well,
but, okay,
for now.
Working with, it's more of like, kinda.
Kinda.
He's there to kind of help out, but if he can take over, that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And Abaddon knows this, I'm assuming, because Abaddon's not an idiot. So I'm assuming he keeps him on a short leash.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Okay. Well, anyways, tell us what happens with this boarding action.
Okay. So anyway, under Garradon's direction, they fought with determination, despite their inexperience, fighting off the attacks by demon hordes. The defenders' bolter fire boomed through the corridors, but ultimately failing to halt the onslaught of the demon Prince Bellicor. Shantu headed for the gun decks, intending to use the mighty vessel's continent-wrecking firepower to assail the Imperial Palace upon Terra's surface. Without enough men to stop him, the Imperial Fists made an emergency translation into the warp, and battle was joined once more as the Phalanx plunged through the screaming tides of the Imperium. Just as it looked like the infested vessel might be lost, the lower decks were suddenly awash with spectral fire that burned back the demons capering in its corridors. When the fire had faded, an unprecedented number of the Legion of the Damned stamped through the Star Fortress's iron corridors, pitilessly exterminating those demons that survived their initial attack.
For those that don't know, we have briefly talked about the Legion of the Damned a few times. They are kind of cool, but they're definitely the Space Marines or the Astartes version of a MacGuffin. They kind of just randomly show up, they save people, and then they disappear.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But they actually look cool doing it in comparison to like Belisarius' call. The Imperial Fists, prepared to fight to the last man if necessary, took heart and launched a spirited counterattack on Shantu's forces. Aided by the Legion of the Damned, the Imperial Fists emerged victorious. Garradon and the remnants of his force set a course to Cadia, where, despite their best efforts, including destroying the Blackstone Fortress, Will of Eternity, the world falls to Abaddon's assault. The battered Phalanx is instrumental in the final evacuation of Cadia's survivors fleeing the destruction of the world. Now, before we end, do you have any final thoughts, Sektar?
Oh, I've got a few. Well, first off, anyways, I can't think of any other Space Marine chapter, at least of the original 18 or 20, that are more of the defenders of humanity than the Imperial Fists. I just really can't think of any. What I mean by defenders of humanity, I mean
defenders of the Imperium.
Yeah, not humans themselves, but the Imperium in and of itself as a whole.
Because that of humans themselves, that would probably go to the salamanders.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. Oh yeah, wholeheartedly. And it's kind of interesting because, I mean, obviously, anyways, with the salamanders, we've talked about this before. They are there anyways to protect humans. That they figure is their goal, and we've talked about how, as opposed to that, anyways, you have the Black Templar, who will literally like step on a human to kill something that is trying to kill that human. So it's kind of one of those interesting.
Not as bad as the Marines Velvet, though, where they go here.
They use them as
here.
But I figure, anyways, when it comes to like defending humanity itself, I would put the Imperial Fist probably like what? Like kind of in the middle, right? Like defending humans in and of themselves?
Maybe.
Okay, well, what are you thinking?
I don't know exactly where I'd put them.
Well, then why'd you say maybe?
Be somewhere in the middle, I would assume, too.
Okay. I don't think that they care as much as, like, for instance, Space Wolves or Vulcan's Boys, but I think they care a whole lot more than, like, the Black Templar and the Dark Angels.
And the Marines Velvet.
Right.
And probably the Minotaurs.
But they are the defenders of the Imperium. I don't think there's any founding that does that better than them, right?
Not they can think of offhand.
I mean, their bastions and fortresses just kind of speak for themselves across the entire Imperium. But this also, anyways, I think might be a clue as to why. But why do you think, anyways, it seems like every story that we ever really talk about, the Imperial Fist kind of gets the crap beat out of them, even more than the salamanders. which is saying something.
Because most of the notable battles that they're in are the ones where they're losing. Because, like you said before, originally basically what they do is they'd wipe out a place, then replace the power with another one, basically.
Right. Well, but then they fortify anyways where they are. That's I think actually a very key thing. So that they have sustainability of whatever planet they're in.
When you have a group that's like that, a lot of the records will not necessarily be based off of what they did beforehand, but what happened afterwards. And so you're looking less at what they achieved beforehand and more of, okay, what happened after they achieved whatever the great thing was. Oh, well, what's going to happen in most cases? They're going to be attacked.
Right. I think that's actually a really good point. But I think actually, I think that also what combines with that is kind of what we talked about when it came to siege warfare, is that if you're defending a place, you're really holding it until you can get reinforcements to come help you. Right?
Right. Well, so, plus the fact that most of the events that we look up are the Iron Warriors going against them, which, let's face it, the Iron Warriors are
pretty good at what they do.
Yeah, they're siege masters. That's kind of their thing.
But no, what I'm saying is that so every time that we get like one of these notable stories, very rarely, or notable campaigns, very rarely is it that the Imperial Fists are on the assault. Normally they are defending, which is what they do. So 9 times out of 10 anyways, I mean, they're waiting until somebody can relieve them. Which, by the way, isn't always true. I mean, like you were saying anyways about how a bunch of the Imperial Fists had moved on to Cadia, and they were trying to help there, which they did a swimming job. That's a different story. They didn't do too bad, but I mean, they still lost. Everybody lost to Cadia. But what I'm saying,
Abaddon did lose a Black Fortress, which is a huge loss. But
yeah, but at the same time, he caused the Great Rift. I think he's okay with it. Like I said, just this. Normally, anyways, when we talk about the Imperial Fist, they are defending something. They aren't the aggressors. They're defending, which is what they do. So, to me, anyways, I think that's why, anyways, it just seems like they're always getting the crap kicked out of them. It's not that that's always the case. It's just more, like I said before, they're defending. So they are not the aggressors. And it always seems like, the annoying part about it, though, is it always seems like the Ultramarines are the ones that come anyways and bail them out, which is just annoying. It's like, oh, the Ultramarines are here. Ugh.
Well, let's face it, the Ultramarines are the ones that seem to have the most people.
Unless you're talking to a space wolf. They have the biggest company. On that interesting note, we are out of time. Join us next week as we discuss our favorite subject, notable characters.
Fantastic. Looking forward to talking about Alexis Pollux.
No. We're not doing that because we covered him.
Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this box. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out the shop. We got some cool stuff there, like clothes, pillows, and hats. And if you really enjoyed this program, feel free to join our membership program in our YouTube channel, Tales of Ashuraka.
Yes, but like I said before, unfortunately, we can't.
And don't forget to put your questions in the comments so we have a boatload of them for our Q&A at the end of the month.
Have a great day. And as always,
until next time, this is Ekthar
and Yuxin
signing off.